opportunity to co-host an event with the Austrian Consul General and the Austrian Trade Commission. So I want to thank our partners. I want to thank my team here, and Mike just arrived, so I introduced everybody else, Mike. And thanks for being here tonight, thanks to the team. And next I would like to hand it over to the Austrian Consul General in Los Angeles, Dr. Michael Postl.
Thank you, Gerhard. I have prepared a small speech. You know, like diplomats are, they have everything written down. But welcome to all of you. It's great to have you here. And I'm really excited to welcome you to the first Tech Diplomacy Talk in Los Angeles. First of all, I want to thank Gerhard Abdallat, Dean of the School of Management, Mike Postl, Executive Director of the Stephen Dorfman Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, Christine Bell, the Program Manager of Hub 101, Volker Amann, our Trade Commissioner in Los Angeles, and of course our panelists, A.J. Abdallat, CEO from Beyond Limits, John Garcia, Assistant Professor of Finance, CLU, and Jonathan Pearce, IT lawyer, SoCal IP Law Group. I would like first to explain a little bit what the context is. So the Austrian Tech Diplomacy Talks take place worldwide and in the following context. The realization that key digital technologies are becoming increasingly important due to their transformative and disruptive impact on economies, foreign policies, geopolitics, as well as on diplomatic decision-making. In order to find appropriate responses to these new challenges, and in close cooperation with the United States, the European Union and its member states, increased attention will be paid to building the capacities of a strategically better positioned tech diplomacy. In accordance with traditional orientation of our foreign policy, Austrian tech diplomacy contributes to shaping an order in the digital space that is based on international law and human rights. In this respect, digital humanism offers a good compass for dealing with the great potential and risks of today's new technologies. This event is in cooperation with California Lutheran University and its School of Management. On the Austrian side, the cooperation partner is Advantage Austria and the Office of the Austrian Trade Commission. At this point, I would also like to mention our intern Lucas, who planned and coordinated this event. Thank you, Lucas. Together, we cooperate and operate in the context of Refocus Austria, an ongoing initiative of the Austrian government to support the Austrian economy across the globe after the pandemic. Refocus Austria reflects the key pillars upon which Austria's economy will be built in the future: renewable energy, e-mobility, sustainability, digital transformation, infrastructure, urban technology, and tourism. Let us now watch the video message of the Austrian Secretary of State for Digitalization and Telecommunication, Florian Turski.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to be with you today, although it's digital and not in person. Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping the global economy, presenting both significant opportunities and challenges, not only for the Austrian economy. Businesses that adopt AI quickly will gain economic benefits, with key impacts on productivity, innovation, and employment. AI is good at handling normal tasks, freeing up human resources for more creative and strategic tasks. This will lead to increased productivity and overall economic growth. Regarding innovation, AI serves as a powerful engine, driving enhancements such as self-driving cars, virtual assistants, and personalized medicine. The European Union has taken a significant step with the so-called AI Act, ensuring that AI systems used in the European Union are safe and secure, while respecting fundamental rights and European values. The AI Act aims to establish clear rules for AI use in the European Union, making it safe, ethical, and human-centered. In Austria, Vantage Austria provides intelligence and business development services, with the Austrian Trade Commission serving as a vital tool in international relations, focusing on AI, cybersecurity, quantum computing, and more. As AI transforms the global economy and offers significant opportunities for innovation, creating ethical guidelines is essential to ensure the responsible development and the use of AI. Thank you very much.
Let me now turn to the European Union and its long journey to finalize its own AI Act. The EU started back in 2018 with a task force to elaborate a framework for AI and digitalization, followed by discussions about the digital transition, and in 2021 the EU Commission presented a proposal of a legal text on that topic. After extensive negotiations, only last week the EU institutions reached a political compromise agreement. Senior envoy for digital to the US and head of the EU office in San Francisco, Gerard de Graaf, will give us now an introduction to the new EU AI Act.
Hello from San Francisco. My name is Gerard de Graaf. I'm the head of the EU office in San Francisco that was set up just over a year ago, 1st of September 2022, in order to bring Europe a little closer to the west coast of the United States and the west coast a little closer to Brussels. I'm very honored and pleased to be your guest at the tech diplomacy talk organized by the Austrian Consul General in Los Angeles in cooperation with the Austrian Foreign Ministry, and to say a few words about how Europe is positioning itself in tech and particularly around artificial intelligence. It's very timely, this short presentation, because the European Union has just agreed as a first democratic region, organization in the world, a set of rules to govern the use of artificial intelligence in our economy and in our society. The Council of Ministers and the European Parliament agreed those rules on the 8th of December, after 36 hours of negotiations. So what did they agree? I think first of all, they agreed that AI used in the European Union should be safe and trustworthy. And so there are going to be certain conditions to be put on AI that is presenting a certain risk. AI, for example, that is used in order to determine whether somebody can get a loan from a bank or a mortgage, or AI that is used to select people for a recruitment for a job, or students to admit students to university or for medical health care. There will be certain protections that companies that are putting those and organizations that are putting those AI applications on the market will have to meet. There is other more limited rules around transparency for AI that is kind of not presenting that type of risk. The European Union is also regulating the very powerful generative AI models that we have seen coming out with a year ago, ChatGPT-3 and now ChatGPT-4, in order to make sure that they are also safe, that they reflect and respect our values and our legal systems, and also that they cannot easily be used by bad actors to create harm. So this framework, it will take a little bit of time to tidy it up and to adopt it by the Council and by the Parliament next year, but will be implemented from the end of next year, and then the full implementation will take effect by the beginning of 2026. So, what does that mean for the world? What does it mean for digital diplomacy? Well, it means that the European Union has set a standard that many countries around the world who are asking themselves the same question: how can we benefit from all of the opportunities of AI, but at the same time, how can we avoid or mitigate the risks, can look at and implement. And you know from experience, I mean, in the past we've had the GDPR, the data protection, we've had more recently the Digital Services Act to make sure that platforms act responsibly, that the internet is safe, and that also with the Digital Markets Act that kind of companies compete fairly. These are models for other countries in the world to follow. And so we are working and engaging very actively with countries around the world, internationally, also in international fora, in the OECD, in the G7 context, in the UN context, in order to present the European approach in this area. We are quite confident that a lot of countries around the world will want to draw inspiration from the European approach. That's AI. There's much more to discuss, and I'm sure that during the tech diplomacy talk you will discuss about many other technologies and how they're going to impact our societies. And we wish you all the best, and we look forward to kind of staying in touch. Greetings from San Francisco.
With that, I invite our members of the panel to come and take a seat, please.
There's a reason why they put me here. I'll explain to you in a second.
Yeah, I can explain. You come in the middle.
Oh no.
Don't trip.
Yes, here. So I will just give the floor to the panelists, and they will introduce themselves. First, we start with AJ Abdallat, CEO Beyond Limits. AJ.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I want to thank CLU and Health 101 for the invite. I'm glad to be here. My name is AJ Abdallat, and I am the CEO of Beyond Limits. Beyond Limits is an artificial intelligence company based in Southern California. But I'm also proud to say we are a graduate of Health 101. So actually that's where we started. Although we are a Caltech spin-off, we started here at Health 101. It really is kind of an interesting topic about artificial intelligence globally. We have a tremendous opportunity in terms of the digital economy and digital transformation. And it's really interesting if you look today at the top 10 companies, in terms of market cap, 6 out of the 10 are in digital transformation. You got Apple, Microsoft, Meta. I actually would make an argument 7, not 6, because I would include Tesla in that group. Because Tesla, I view Tesla not as a car company, I view Tesla as a software company, but they do produce cars. So you can see the transformation of the world economy, that 6 to 7 companies, the largest company in the world, are in the digital space. The theme today is to talk about AI in the US, Europe, and in Austria. But I thought, let me just, if I may, just a quick background on the state of the union of AI. I'm really excited about where AI is heading. I feel we are at the cusp of going to what I call AI 2.0. But before I talk about or explain what AI 2.0, let's talk about AI 1.0. So for the last 15 years, we have done a phenomenal job in terms of generating a lot of data. We were able to basically leverage and use that data to make predictive decisions. So today, what we refer to machine learning and deep learning, and to just basically explain that in simplicity, it's the ability to basically predict the future based on the past. What we do is we look at these large data sets and we try to see if we can basically uncover patterns and features. And we say that these patterns and features will basically continue. So you predict the future based on the past. And we've done a phenomenal job in terms of basically using and leveraging data. And we were able to solve a lot of problems. But now move forward to 2022. We're beginning to basically run into some complexity. Data alone is not sufficient. My company, Beyond Limits approach to AI is coming from the unmanned space program. We believe data is important, but also the human element is very important. I'm here to tell you, we're not gonna obsolete the human race. We're here to stay. In fact, the future of AI is going to be collaboration between the human race and AI. It's interesting, we are living now in what they call the fourth industrial revolution. It's all about these emerging technologies, digital technologies, AI, blockchain, etc. Now the prediction, according to Gartner, that we're gonna get to the fifth industrial revolution in 2035. And you know what's the fifth industrial revolution is about? It's really about dynamics between the human race and machines. This is gonna be very, very critical. Gartner also predicts that in 2035, 40% of us will be managed by AI. Just think about this. 40% of us, the manager will be an AI system. So we really need to learn how to exist with these systems, you know. Now let me talk about AI 2.0 and what I mean by AI 2.0. So I mentioned we were able in the last 15 years to basically leverage advances in data and in compute infrastructure to predict the future. What we're getting to right now is we need something else. We're running into a problem where you have gaps in the data, missing data, contradictory data, and what do you do? Well, in AI 2.0, we're moving into what we call hybrid AI. Hybrid AI is basically the ability to leverage the machine learning, deep learning, numeric approach in addition to what we call human-like reasoning. This is why the human element is going to be very relevant, and you're not going to obsolete the human race. So it's about hybrid AI is about data-driven approach and what we call neurosymbolic or human-like reasoning. AI 2.0 is about generative AI. Just out of curiosity, you know, we mentioned large language models, which is the term we use for ChatGPT. How many of you have used ChatGPT? If you can just, you know, wow, that's impressive. You know, a lot of you. Just think about it. ChatGPT 3, when it was introduced, it was based on training 135 billion parameters. Think about it. 135 billion parameters. ChatGPT 4 was about 1 trillion parameters. And now they're basically saying that the next generation of ChatGPT large language model, it's going to be an order of magnitude. So now we're looking at systems where we're training large data sets. It's requiring a lot of compute infrastructure. Today, just to give you an idea, for 1 day of compute infrastructure to run large language model, basically we're using energy to power 26,000 homes in the US for a full year. Imagine that. So we have a potential problem here. that is with climate change, with carbon footprint. So it is exciting. We got some challenges. And one trend I'm beginning to see globally in terms of looking at AI, countries are beginning to weaponize AI. So we're seeing some regulations. If you look at it today, we have two major superpowers in AI. We have the US and we have China. And I would say, with all due respect, Your Excellency, there is a gap between the third, and that's the EU. But trust me, there is a race. Countries like India, Israel, even Saudi Arabia, they basically are competing to get to that, third place. They're investing significant amount of money. It's going to be a race. What we're beginning to see here, I talked about large language models, and you need large compute infrastructure. Well, those large compute infrastructure, the key company that is basically pioneering in that field is NVIDIA. Have you heard of NVIDIA? NVIDIA now, by the way, joined the $1 trillion club. So they have a market cap of over $1 trillion, okay? The US has passed regulation where in certain countries you can't buy NVIDIA GPUs, okay? That's gonna be a problem for some countries, okay? I actually think this is gonna drive innovation. People are gonna start looking at different ways to basically run the large language model. I am not a big champion that, of we need to run large data sets, because it's gonna create what we call, one problem we have large language model is hallucination, okay? Because now the source of the data is the internet. We have some good information on the internet. We also have some bad information on the internet. One of the pioneers of AI is a gentleman by, Kylie Fu, okay? And he mentioned one example that I thought was really interesting. He said basically, he asked ChatGPT a question, and he posed the question to ChatGPT. He said, can you tell me the benefits of basically feeding my kids broken glass? And ChatGPT generated a beautiful report. Talk about, calcium and how it's gonna basically improve the density of their bones. I mean, think about it. This is a system that doesn't have common sense to realize that, but this is what hallucination is all about. This is why it's so important to build guardrails. This is why it's so important to basically build transparency in the system, to have explainable AI, to have an audit trail where we can basically understand how we arrived at the answer and provide a step-by-step in terms of how we arrived at the answer. I think with that, I'm gonna pause with an opportunity. Professor John.
Thank you, Abdallat. Very thought-provoking presentation. Now I hand over to John Garcia, Assistant Professor of Finance here at U. Please, John.
Thank you very much. Okay, so John Garcia again, I'm a professor here, assistant professor at California Lutheran University. And this is my third year here, and I teach analytics courses and finance courses in the undergraduate, MBA, and Master of Quantitative Economics. So I spent some time here with many of you on this fabulous site. And I've been here for 3 years. Before that, I was teaching data science at the University of North Texas, and actually been doing data science work since really 2007, around then. So before coming into academia, I was working at Toyota for 15 years, and there I was overseeing finance and data science in our financial services division. And before data science even had a name, back in 2007. And before that, I was with Pearce. And I'm obviously a big fan of analytics and data science and what AI is kind of morphed into and becoming. And so I'm very glad to be here and having this discussion with all of you. And so one thing I've noticed is now as a professor, this is my fourth year now being a professor here at Cal Lutheran, I seem to have less direct answers and more questions on things. So I tend to ask more questions than really have answers of things. And so I just have a few comments today that I'm going to go through, and really I don't think I'll have many answers, but I hope to to motivate some questions that we should all really be thinking about as we kind of enter this new era. And I'm going to focus on 2 questions. The first question is really around, what is the future of work? What does work look like in the future? And what are the implications of that, well, personally as individuals in the workplace, but as educators, what that means for students that are going through our universities. And then the second question that I'll pose is, what are the implications of generative AI's capabilities in our trust in digital information and potential misinformation that would come from that? So to motivate these questions, I'm going to share some statistics that really going to inform some of my thinking around this. And to do that, let's see if this works. Oh, too far. I'm not going to be looking back, that's why I printed out some of the slides so I can know where we're at. If you'd like to follow along with some of the slides, I'm going to kind of put up some of the facts. There's a QR code up here, as well as a tiny URL that you can take a look at. And so as I kind of go through, you can certainly take a look at that, especially since our back here is probably blocking a quarter of it. So feel free to scan that and take a look at some of these data points that I'm going to go through again to motivate some of our thinking here. So if you have that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide here. And one thing is, if you look at what's going on with the implications of generative AI to the economy, it's quite clear that it's going to have a dramatic effect. Now, some of the data you may see here, if you look at McKinsey's estimate is that it may have an effect in the order of 2.6 to 4.6 trillion annually. That's a pretty dramatic number, a big number. And it may increase global GDP by 7% over the next 10 years. And from a workforce perspective, it's estimated that 10% of the tasks that carried out by the workforce can be automated by generative AI. So one thing that's clear, it's having a significant effect on kind of what the future economy may look like. And one thing that we see is these tools, particularly if you look at GPT-4, are very capable tools. If you look at this slide here, where it was some study that was done, so this is the paper that's linked here on top if you looked at that, where they evaluated its performance across multiple types of standardized tests, and it generally performs better than most humans do. It's also passed the CPA exam, the bar exam, the CFA exam. It's passed the U.S. medical licensing examination. And it's actually, there's been some studies that show that the advice from GPT-4 is sometimes better than a doctor. And so, it's very capable. Now, the question that I have here as we look at some of this data is, what are we measuring here? Are we measuring its ability to retrieve information and find patterns in the data? Is that what this is measuring? Or are we measuring its reasoning and intellectual capability? Or are we measuring its ability to mimic human beings? It's not quite clear exactly what we're measuring. The people who created these tools don't know also how it's working. Funny story, I was reading this today. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but apparently ChatGPT-4 and GPT 3.5 has gotten lazier in December. It's producing smaller responses to requests, and is generally providing lower quality results than it did just last month. Some of that is people think that it's mimicking human beings in some way. Human beings in December, what do we do in December? Sorry, kicking back a little bit, it's going to be way too much. So some people think, and OpenAI also can't say it's not true, that it's potentially mimicking human beings in some way. They're trying to look for a fix, by the way. Still haven't figured out why it's getting lazier in December, but it's a fact. It's actually gotten lazy as we speak right now, and they're trying to fix that. So we're not exactly kind of how it works. The people who created this don't know how it works. It's just kind of scary when we kind of look at this. And because of that, there's quite a bit of fear when you look at society as a whole. if you look at some of the kind of stats here, this is from a poll that was done by Harris Group in July. Here in this poll, they said 36% of adults believe that AI will replace 36% of all jobs. So US adults believe that AI was going to replace 36% of all jobs. And then 1 in 5 believe more than 50% of jobs could be replaced completely by AI. And then, but 47% see AI as complementing them in their job. Here's a kind of another stat related to this, where 60%, and McKinsey here estimates that 60% of current tasks will be automated by generative AI. If you look at financial services, this is a poll that was done with financial services executives. And in this poll, 73% of financial services executives believe that generative AI will replace them. So there's quite a bit of fear out there in the workplace as to kind of what this means. Here's just another data point where you have 52% of individuals are really more concerned about the existence of these tools, and so there's a lot of anxiety and tension as it relates to the generative AI capabilities and what it means. Now, here's the other thing that is kind of different from prior technological innovations, and that is that it's really coming at effectively being able to do knowledge work. And as a result, when you look at the study, there was a study done that evaluated basically the task. It looked at a lot of different tasks that different professions do, and evaluated what tasks could be automated or augmented in a significant way. And it turns out that the higher the salary of the profession, the higher the likelihood that it can be disrupted or automated by generative AI. So basically, the more you earn, the higher the likelihood that generative AI can maybe replace you in some way. And that's been different from what we've seen in prior technological innovations in the space. So it's quite interesting, and the implications for all of us in this room who are knowledge workers, right? But there's also a kind of a positive side whereby if we look at AI and its ability to kind of level set things. And so, particularly, there's a study that was done, it's quite a fascinating study that was done by some researchers at Harvard and Wharton and others that looked at Boston Consulting Consultants, which is up there with McKinsey as far as what they do and the type of work that they do. Obviously, very capable individuals. And what they did is did an experiment. Let's look at let's evaluate kind of the performance of the quality and speed in which they do the work for individuals that are given a GPT-4 with no training. Let's let them use GPT-4 in their work, and then the other set that didn't use it. And they're just trying to compare kind of what effect it had on the quality of the work and the speed of the work. And they looked at the performance across two segments of individuals. Those that were low performers, obviously they know their history and how they performed in the past. So they said, let's look at low performers and those that were high performers. Well, what they saw is that those that were low performers, the quality of the work increased by 41%, 43%. And for those that were in the high performers, they improved by 17%. Okay? But they still improved. And now, though, when you look at kind of the difference between low performers and high performers, the gap shrank from 22% to 4%. So basically, there's not really a significant difference in performance level between the two groups anymore, whether you're low performer or high performer. So in a way, it can bring some equity to the workplace. So that's I found that to be quite interesting. But there is a lot of fear in how this may displace work, and it's not totally unwarranted. We see some articles recently. Looked at last week. There was an article here, Klarna, which is actually a very large fintech company from Europe, one of the largest ones. they've put a stop on hiring, and they're saying we're going to just stop hiring and we're going to replace those that are trained with AI. Okay, so you're seeing Klarna is taking that direction. More closer to home here, you're also seeing IBM. IBM did announce something similar where they stopped hiring and they're going to just try to use AI to replace some of the workload as they attrit. Now, there's been a lot of discussion lately, internally, within companies, generative AI companies in society, around how we should approach moving forward. Should we kind of slow down, or should we kind of go full throttle, forward? And so there's been, we've seen this play out actually in the board of the OpenAI, right? That's if you read some of the kind of articles around kind of the genesis behind this, you saw that basically the OpenAI board was of the opinion that we should slow down and worry a lot more. And the indication was that others think, well, maybe actually we got to speed up and worry. So there's a lot of debate on this, but so far it seems like the speed up and worry is kind of the camp that's winning. And so there's a lot of progress being made very quickly before we can fully assimilate what the full downstream implications of this are. And so it's quite interesting to kind of see where this goes. But my view, and this is just my personal view, is that in the short term, I believe that generative AI will not have a significant effect on the number of jobs in totality. And I think ultimately it's going to enable users to do more higher level work. And I think we're going to be happier for it too. Because a lot of the work that we're automating, certainly a lot of the work I'm automating, is stuff I didn't like doing. Okay. And so if I can automate work that I like doing, but I have to do, if the AI can do it and I complain about it, I'm all for that. And so I think you're seeing a lot of that happening today. Now, the question is though, exactly, what is kind of this rapid advancement, what does it mean in the future, and how will we find the way we work and learn and interact in the next decade? That's a completely open question, and kind of what that looks like. But I think short term, it's going to be more of augmenting existing tasks. If you look at a professor, there's 25 different tasks that a professor has. Some of them are grading, creating lectures. Creating lectures, certainly I can augment some of that and use AI to help you with that. Some of them are mentoring students. It's not going to replace that. But some of others, it can help me if I'm coding, if I'm grading some coding, I can use AI to help me grade coding. But it's not going to replace other elements. So I think you're going to see, by and large, a lot of jobs you'll be able to augment some work, some elements you'll be able to automate, but by and large, you're going to just be automating things that you're not terribly excited to do. And so, but what that future looks like, it's an open question, and a lot of it depends on exactly what are these tools, and how they advance it, exactly how are they actually advancing, in what way. Are they just getting better at retrieving data and detecting patterns? Or are they really reasoning? And it's not quite clear on this. And that can actually have a significant effect on what that looks like. And so, just a few other things here that I'll mention quickly here are around kind of this fear around what the future implications and existential risks that you may see with this. I mean, I think certainly we're not in any place in the short term of a Terminator style type of development of AI, but there's a lot of belief we may be there at some point. That remains to be seen. But in the short term, there's risks that we have now that I like to more focus on, and some of those risks are around information integrity, trust, and misinformation that may come from that. That's today. We're seeing that today. I think this AI that destroys the world, that's a future problem. I think today's problem is going to be more around the integrity of data and kind of what that means in misinformation. I want to point out a couple of studies here. So one is, this was just from earlier this month, the study where they looked at some applied linguists, and they attempted to decipher. These are trained linguists, professionally trained linguists, who are trying to decipher, who are evaluating, deciphering whether this was written by an AI or a real person. They can't do it. The success rate, positive identification rate was 30.9%, less than 50-50. And these are trained linguists. So what does that mean for us? We're even less capable. So you have that going on. And the other thing is you have a lot of challenges in being able to decipher what is AI generated text. We as human beings are wired to initially trust until you were told, trained not to trust for some reasons. Right? So our initial kind of setting is trust. And so because of that default kind of trust bias, it's a higher likelihood that we may be able to take misinformation and be able to fail to accurately kind of discriminate between what is AI generated versus what is human generated. I found this interesting story that's quite fascinating. There's an AI right now that's an AI created influencer that's generating over $10,000 a month. It's real, you can look it up. And a lot of people who are interacting with this influencer don't even realize that it's an AI. And so this is happening now. So you have that. And just this morning I came across this, and I did a 45-second clip. You can watch the full 22 minutes if you click on a link that I'm going to show you here. But let's watch this here for 46 seconds.
Hello, and welcome to Channel 1, a new way of consuming, reporting, and thinking about the news powered by artificial intelligence. Today, you'll witness AI-generated stories and headlines, captivating visuals, and data-driven insights. From global news to finance to entertainment, we'll show you how technology enables us to bring you a global perspective 24/7, right from the heart of our AI-native newsroom. All presented by our team of AI-generated reporters.
Maybe you hear the words artificial intelligence and you're immediately skeptical or concerned about technology gone crazy. But everything you'll see on Channel 1 relies on trusted sources and fact-checking.
That's just the first 46 seconds. You can watch the full 22 minutes. It's real. It's launching next month. And right now it's pretty good. I watched the full 22 minutes and it didn't feel weird. You can just kind of tell they're not real humans, but they're pretty close. And let's keep this in mind. We're in the Mosaic version of this technology. I remember Mosaic and we were internet searching back in the 90s. We're in the worst version of generative AI we will ever see in our lifetimes. And so it's only going to get better pretty quickly. Pretty soon, I think next year, we would watch this whole thing and we wouldn't be able to tell the difference between whether it was a real human or a generative AI that created this. And so I encourage you to take a look at this. It's quite fascinating. But what this means is there's going to be a proliferation of potential misinformation. You're going to see a lot of deep fakes. Some of you have seen the Pope here. This was a couple months ago where someone did this deep fake of the Pope wearing this puffy jacket. It was true for a couple days until it was realized that it wasn't. So in a world where AI-generated content is increasingly indistinguishable from human content, how do we maintain trust and authenticity of this and the implications of that? The things that are more concerned to me, especially as we enter elections and look at geopolitics, I think this is the real threat. You can create these echo chambers of areas where people kind of start doing this and create some political unrest in a way that can be very damaging to societies. And that's a risk we have today, that it's only going to get worse. You can have a lot of these tools right now. The biggest ones are, obviously GPT-4, BART, and others. But now you can actually even have Mistral. I don't know if that's a European firm. Some of you may be familiar, but Mistral has launched their version that you can load on your computer. That's equivalent, but slightly better than GPT 3.5 that you can adjust. And so that's going to kind of open up new avenues of kind of changing how information is created in using these tools. But again, more questions than answers, but these are two of the questions that in my mind are important questions to kind of think about as a society what this means for us as we move forward with the evolution of gender and ag. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Really fascinating examples and pertinent questions related to AI. Now I would hand over to Jonathan Pearce, IT lawyer, SoCal IP Law Group, and we are very grateful to you, Jonathan, for jumping in at such a short notice. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Yeah, don't follow a professor with like 30 slides, man. What do I got? I got nothing. I only have a few thoughts because I came quite late, but one of the first thoughts I had watching the video actually was one that I was already having, and I was kind of giggling to myself, like, please excuse me, my friends from Austria, but I don't think any leading AI firms are in Europe. And so it's really interesting to me. I'm a lawyer, I practice law. It's interesting to me that the first regulation of AI sort of that passes in the world is based in Europe. And it's like, and I think this reflects sort of, I mean, GDP was like this as well. Like, America had to react to regulations from another country, and sort of, California jumped on board and did almost exactly the same regulation, because California feels that way. But other states in the United States were like, what the heck is this malarkey? Like, what are you doing to us? And I think that reflects a very American sort of view. And it's kind of interesting in the context of maybe Brexit and sort of Europe. I feel like the EU is sort of flexing or feeling its oats a little bit, and that it's become this place that is sufficiently large economically that it can flex a little bit. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing. But it does feel a bit strange in America, and I think it reflects the view of Americans traditionally. I don't know, our politics worldwide are crazy at this point, right? But like, traditionally Americans' policy has viewed new technology as things that we should let run rampant a little bit and then see what happens. I think with a view towards let's have innovation happen first, and they'll figure it out afterwards. And I think that's very different from the European worldview that is like, oh my goodness, this is terrifying. We should figure out something to do about this. And it's sort of, when I was listening to the timeline, because I read a little bit about this today, I was sort of trying to prepare for my talk tonight, and the timeline of 2018, they were preparing this, I was thinking about my career, right? I'm a computer scientist by training, I'm a patent attorney, I'm pretty much on the cutting edge, theoretically, of technology that's happening. And my first experience of AI ever was in 2016, when one of my clients, Pinscreen, came to me and had this crazy concept of, so I do a lot of video related work, this is why this client was referred to me. They had this crazy idea where, if you guys have played, some of you who are younger perhaps play video games, where it became novel in like the mid-2000s to put your face on your Tiger Woods character, or in the Madden game, where you could like upload an image of your face and you could be a player in the game, and it was like, they were always horrible. You, like, your nose would be like squished over your face, and it would look crazy, and it would look like wrapping paper wrapped around a really poor shape of a head. My client came with this idea of, he had trained AI at the time, which it was neural networks at the time, it was brand new, 2016, or theoretically brand new. And he trained neural networks on a bunch of really high quality albedo maps, is what they're called, like these maps of textures you can wrap around people's faces, and 2D images that were purposely poor quality. And he trained an AI to make really high quality models. And so you could stick these heads on people, and he was doing, Kim Jong-un was, I think, hilarious when he did like a great model of him from a crappy picture. And I was writing patents on this in 2016, being like, this is bonkers, I can't believe it. So what you would do is, once you trained it, of course, you would upload an image of your face, a really crappy one taken with your cell phone from 2006, like grainy and cruddy, and it would pop out this beautiful 3D model of your face. And I was like, holy crap, it's not wrapping it around a weird head, it's like, whatever. And so, sorry, that's a long story to say, they were great models. But it's a long story to say, like, when I hear that the EU was proposing legislation and beginning the process of regulating AI in 2018, I'm like, holy crab cakes. Like, I had gotten an office action response in the patent I wrote on these things, like, by then. They were issued in like 2012, or 2020, or 2019 or something. And I was like, that is bonkers that they take that sort of aggressive an approach to sort of, we're gonna regulate this, we're worried about this. It made sense to me. And then the other comment that I sort of had was along your lines, like, I am that knowledge worker, right? My daily life consists, less and less these days, but primarily in writing really long, boring documents that have lots of little numbers in them and talk about weird tech and points out how they work. And huge chunks of what I do will be automated, probably in the very near future. And so, and you're exactly right. I don't know if that blew by anybody when he said that, I agree with him. that has not been the case for every other industrial revolution. You know, like you think about automating factories, right? What happened is like the guys who would dig things out or cut things out or whatever lost their jobs. And they were replaced by a machine that would stamp out a bunch of metal parts that were exactly the same. And traditionally you could flee or you could get educated, and your parents, my parents told me to go get a degree, go get an advanced degree, because then you can't be replaced. You're a knowledge worker. That is not the case. Like, that's exactly the kind of thing that AI can do really well. It can read the entire database of the patent office and prepare a pretty good patent application start, if not actually prepared, based upon this great data set that already existed and has existed since like 1890. Like, you know, and so I think about what that means, and there's tons of tools coming out, and you know, I do talks on AI and IP practice, which is what I do as an intellectual property lawyer, and what's coming, and I think it's exactly that. But I hope that it will be, as the first speaker said, sort of room for creativity, room for the human element, where I'm sort of commanding these tools, hopefully, and I think that's the case. If you look at the way law has been practiced, not that you guys all do that, but we've added all these tools all along the way. Like in the patent office, we have online filing starting in 2006, and old patent attorneys were like, what's going to happen is it's just your filing these patents online, not a big deal. And Word came to be used in like, you know, 1988 or whatever, and it became, you know, these are just tools that help you do your practice better and hopefully faster. And so I think it is not as scary a future as you think, but I think it'll be a hard adjustment for people, including me. I mean, I'm going to be an old hat and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that's sort of the two main comments I had.
Thank you, Jonathan, and it's always refreshing to, let's say, challenge people or institutions. Allow me first to a little bit respond. I think the European Union, first of all, thought we have to confront the issue and we have to bring it in the right direction, and the Europeans also work together with the big companies, and there are companies who actually also publicly said we have to do something, we have to find some regulation, and the EU wanted, so we will see how that works out, to find the right balance, just to also encourage innovation, but also to look into the high-risk deployment of artificial intelligence, and the EU is always an institution based on human rights, on values, and that now leads me to the topic of diplomacy and geopolitics. AI is already with us, so the Consul General, we use ChatGPT, we use Google Bard. There are a lot of possibilities where we can use artificial intelligence as tools in diplomacy. We, for instance, can more easily screen media things in countries. We can try to find out trends, in what direction, for instance, politicians are going. We can use artificial intelligence, for instance, to implement agreements, to look if a country is observing the obligation. Then in trade negotiations, for instance, we use trade advisors where, when it comes, for instance, to specific complicated rules of origin, where AI can be really helpful to the diplomats. One other point that I think will be used in diplomacy is the language, because a lot of negotiations are done through languages, also in international fora where you have several languages. I mean, the European Union has multiple languages, also in the United Nations. So here I see a lot of scope for artificial intelligence. Then also in the consular affairs, where you have a regulated procedure, AI can be of help, but it always has to be under the observation of the diplomat, of the human being. So that's our approach. At the end of the day, the human being has, or the diplomat has to make the final decision. Now, and this is even more important when it comes also in areas where we have war, artificial intelligence plays a role. We have a war in the Ukraine, we have a war in the Middle East, we have drones, we have missile defense system. All of those are deployed with artificial intelligence. We also use blockchain, for instance, to get the information on war crimes, on crimes against humanity, so that there is no manipulation that is done with AI. AI is also, for instance, used to identify nuclear tests. It's a very, very efficient way. AI is used currently to map out tunnels, so it's possible with AI to identify where there are tunnels. And here comes also an Austrian foreign policy objective. We want that in the military use of AI, it still has to be under a human being. So this is very, very strong approach Austria has. We started that also in 2021 when the parliament decided the Austrian foreign minister has to advocate that, and we also tried to talk to all our partners, particularly in the United Nations. We initiated joint statements in 2022, both in the General Assembly as well as in the Human Rights Council, that we have to look into the military use of AI. The United States also in February issued a political declaration on the responsible military use of AI and autonomy, and now over 50 or almost 50 countries also aligned themselves. But it's still an open question how far the human factor is still included in the deployment, in the development, and how it is ethnically seen, how it is lawfully seen. So this is an ongoing question, and very pertinent in the current state of affairs in the world. So there are multiple ways and venue in diplomacy and geopolitics where AI is already used, and those countries who have the knowledge, they have an advantage, they have power in economics, in military, and in societal fields. And I think therefore it's important that we find regulations that we can convince other countries and regions also to apply those regulations. So we want, as a European Union, be as a trendsetter for AI regulations, and in the field of military, where the European Union obviously is not a player yet, maybe some would say. We think from the Austrian perspective that the United Nations, which is the global institution that is tasked to keep peace in the world, should set some standards, should set some guidelines, and we tasked in autumn of this year the Secretary General to put forward a report about the use of AI in the military field. So with that, a little bit of insight what diplomacy can also do with artificial intelligence, and I thank you all for listening, and now it's your turn. We open the Q&A session. Thank you.
It's not off anymore.
The lady.
Okay. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. It was really learning a lot being here. It is scary, as you know. Right. My question is for John. I know the data that you collected was great, but was the data collected on the westernized world, the developed world, or across the world? Right? That's one question. Second question is, I heard about gaps, right, in different countries. Like some countries are very advanced in AI, the other countries are not. So from the diplomatic purposes, how do you bring the equity of these countries who are not even developed yet, right? Who are far beyond, they don't even have the resources to learn AI, right? How do you bring the equity for them, right? And bring that into playing field? Thank you.
So on the data part, I mean, there's a lot of studies in there, but really they're primarily US-centric, since those the applications have been mostly focused within the United States with GPT-4. But you know, from an access perspective, GPT-4 can be accessed by well over 1 billion people around the world. Given that you can access, even if you don't pay for the GPT Plus, you can access GPT-4 through Bing AI, which most of the world has access to. But yeah, most of the studies that I showed here were US based.
And on the diplomacy, I think there are two ways. One is the international fora like United Nations, OECD, where countries who are more advanced should actually share their knowledge with other countries, and also in the way of development aid. So the European Union is strong on development aid. I think it's necessary that where we have an advantage in AI, peaceful use in AI, that we share that knowledge and that possibility with the other countries.
Just one other thought I had too, which was, there's a technological element here that's missing too a bit, where the data that runs most AI is Western-centric, right? And so that may be sort of just a problem that is not fixable for the short term, unfortunately. Because where we've trained all this AI is all Western data, mostly. Or Chinese data, I suppose.
Actually, if I may, I actually agree with you. I think there is a concern about the gap between, you know, maybe underdeveloped country and developed countries. But I'm always feel like the glass half full type of guy. Okay, I think we're moving into what we call no-code, low-code AI, and what that means is for domain experts. And trust me, the world is full of smart people. It's not, we don't have a monopoly on that. Okay. That means now these domain experts can basically, they don't have to become data scientists like Professor John to be able to use the tools to basically generate IP and generate, you know, results. So there is hope, okay, but you're right, this is an area of concern.
Did you have questions?
Scott, thank you for the great discussion. I'd like to know if will AI take over humans, knowing that we have unique abilities and capabilities. I think we touched on that, but can you elaborate a bit more?
Sure, I want to use, if I may, an example in the 1990s. I'm telling you, I believe AI will never replace the obsolete human race. Will never do that, okay? In the 1990s, I don't know if you remember, IBM built a big system called Deep Blue. Deep Blue cost $100 million back in the 1990s. Deep Blue was supposed to basically be the genius AI system to play chess. And they did a match between Deep Blue and Garry Kasparov, who basically was the world grandmaster for playing chess. And guess what? Deep Blue won. Garry was depressed, like, oh my God, you know, we're gonna lose to AI, okay? But what Garry didn't realize, that $100 million computer system, if you ask a tic-tac-toe question, it's like, I don't know. So it was built to do a specific task. It was good at specific tasks. If you look as a human race, we are generalists. We're good at so many things. We may not be deep, but we're good at so many things. Today, you hear about AI. AI are good at one specific task. You know, we talk about, you know, artificial general intelligence. That is what John was talking about. That is Skynet. That's, we're not there. It's really gonna take a long time to get there. But what separates the human race from AI system is our ability to look at a lot of things and basically solve for a lot of problems. We may not be experts in everything, but we have the ability to do that. Just quickly, I want to mention things. We have some serious problems coming up. In 2050, we need to get to net zero. I mean, this was the warmest year on record, okay? AI can basically contribute to that. I know there is an area of concern about, is it gonna replace my task? I happen to agree with you. I think at certain tasks, AI is better. But in terms of creativity, AI was created to basically amplify and magnify the human talent. Climate is going to be a problem. Water management is going to be a problem. How are we going to feed an 11 billion people planet by 2050? We're going to basically be able to, it's going to be a collaboration between us and AI. We think symbolically, AI thinks numerically, and you need that hybrid, you need that combination. So I'm here to assure you, we're not going to obsolete the human race.
I would agree with that. My view is that these systems are phenomenal at data retrieval and pattern detection. That's what they're good for. And they're so good that sometimes what we get back appears to be so novel, but it's novel to us, to you, but it's not novel to humanity. Because it's really just taking data that's all out there and it's packaging it or finding the patterns in a way that would be impossible for us to do in such a short period of time. But it's novel to us, a lot of the things we see coming back from these generative AI systems, but it's not novel to humanity. And so it's not, I don't see these tools really creating knowledge. They just do a really good job of regurgitating and packaging the knowledge that's out there in a way that fits kind of what we want it to, what we're asking it to do. And so the current kind of framework or technology stack that we see is probably not going to be what develops Skynet. But that's why, in kind of my comments, is like that's a future problem. Maybe there's some other technology that would evolve from what we have now. But what we do have now, these other problems associated with inability to create. Basically create information that's very hard to distinguish from other humans because that's what it's built on. And that creates a brand new set of problems that we are facing today, and it's going to create some stress, I think, in society in the near future.
I apologize, I didn't finish the story about Gary. I told you he was depressed, he lost to basically Deep Blue. Gary, after a few years, thought about it, and he said, okay, let's do this. I want a rematch with Deep Blue. And he went back and he said, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Deep Blue, you're gonna be assisted by another $100 million machine, by another Deep Blue. And Gary, just give me a smaller machine, because I know now, I just need that ability to look at maybe different scenarios. And guess what? Gary plus a machine beat Deep Blue plus Deep Blue. So there is a hope for the human race.
This is just like anecdotal evidence, which is kind of interesting to me. Maybe it kind of ties what you were saying to what you were saying, which is a few, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, like a Navy machine, I believe AI was being tasked with sort of how it would act if it managed military operations for drones, for example. And one of the rules was it had to get clearance to launch a missile from a human, which is kind of what Austria is lobbying for, which totally makes sense to me, by the way. And it's like, okay, cool. And so it wanted to take out this fake terrorist in a fake world and launch this missile to take this guy out. And the human said no, because there'd be too many casualties. And so in response, the AI said, well, then I want to kill you, human, so that I can do what I want. This is why we need some sort of regulation on these sorts of things.
Yes? I'm going. While I'm getting to the next question, does anyone need water?
Please.
Okay.
Jonathan, I think you said the classical US approach is like, let things happen and see afterwards what we do. But I mean, like, you could see them, like, the history, I'm not that old now, but you see on finance markets, social media, you name it, self-regulation
never worked out. So wouldn't it be better to regulate now to prevent the next crisis and an even bigger crisis, or what do you think?
I disagree. It's never worked out. The one example I would give back to you would be the internet. You know, the internet was government funded by DARPA, and the Congress in the U.S. anyway said taxes hands off for 20 years, and they put that in, and it worked really well. E-commerce flourished. All these companies that we mentioned that are based on tech or based on the internet have made tons of money, and now the 7 biggest companies in the world, basically, right? So I disagree, but I think I don't know. It's like I feel like we're in Jurassic Park or something. You didn't stop to think that you could, or what, you know, that line from Malcolm where it's like you were so busy wondering if you could do it, you didn't stop thinking whether you should. That's the line, and it's like unfortunately it relies on sort of good actors, which may or may not exist. So there's not an answer to your question. My answer would be Europe has certain views, which I don't necessarily disagree with, right? I mean, I agree with you. I think it doesn't hurt, and I think it's nice to see what they do and to lobby for it and otherwise, but I also think it's nice to see what sort of can happen, what's possible, as long as we're not launching missiles at people, and see what happens, and then we'll be like, oh wow, that really sucks, we should fix that. And it does, it can be a very big problem. Financial markets is a great example. It can be a really big problem. So there's not an answer, I don't think.
Jonathan, I agree with you. I think, you know, regulation, we need to basically push on innovation. However, I would say adding a human in the loop is important. I like the policy. I think that's how we put guardrails. Put a human in the loop. We, you know, well, they're bad humans. That's a different problem. Okay, that's right. Okay, but adding a human in the loop can give us that guardrail.
You know, one thought on this as well is I think with the EU AI Act being passed, I think there's a lower probability now that a US Act gets passed just because firms don't want to comply with different regulation. And so I think there's going to be potentially more pushback from US companies because they don't want two different, you know, rules. And inevitably they will be different, which will be some pushback. So
you're seeing it with GDPR basically, right? Like that's the problem with the GDPR. Like I don't dislike the GDPR. I don't like that there are like 7 different. There's like 20 different ones in the US and the GDPR. It's like my internet clients are just like, I don't know what to do. Like, and that's, you don't want that to happen with AI. I agree.
Yeah, I'm crossing.
Sorry. So the question is about regulation and two aspects of it. So one is, what do you expect other countries or continents to do? So let's say EU passed this regulation. So do you expect others to kind of put some regulations in place or not? That's number one. Number two is enforcement. Because a lot of these kind of leaders, including Sam Altman in front of Congress, they talk about IAEA. So IAEA is just like one of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So you can do a lot more enforcements when you're just talking about building atomic bombs. But then you can just like have Llama 2 just on your flash drive and then do, you know, stuff that are not good for humanity in your basement. So number one is what do you expect for other countries to do, and number two is how do you think about enforcement?
I think China will require sort of government involvement, period. Like that'll be their regulation. They'll have some body that they put in place that sort of decides what you can do with it. I think the US will do kind of what I'm talking about, which is nothing for a little bit. They'll talk a lot about it, they'll put out panels, they're already kind of doing it. I was looking at a bunch of it today. They'll put out papers, but they won't put any real policy in for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years is my guess. I don't know about the second question.
I mean, to follow that, I think China would be the most restrictive one, the US would be the most liberal one, and Europe would be just in the middle, with the hope that along the line, countries will find out that this is a reasonable approach. Plus, if the big companies actually are confident with the European regulation, I think they will follow it. In some time and some areas, big companies already do self-regulate their actions. So my hope is that the European Union approach will be a role model that eventually also through the pressure of the companies that will be something that is followed, because when those companies also implement the rules in their activities in Asia and other countries, then then we have it more globally. Plus, Europe will definitely, in their talks with the US on the technological and TTC Council, will advocate for our ideas, and also in international fora, be it in the G7, in the OECD, we will try to lobby for our model.
I think here in the US, you're likely to see states like California and Colorado probably come up with something first. And so I think there's already some things in the pipeline in Colorado and California that will be along these lines. And you kind of saw that with practicing. The California rule is kind of different from most of the other states, and you're likely to see something similar with on this front as well.
I just wonder if they won't be tempered because this is where it all is, right? A little bit. Anyway,
Well,
yes.
let me mention another trend happening in relation to regulations. Today, if you want to do a chat GPT or a large language model, you're basically working on the OpenAI cloud, okay? I can guarantee you countries and big companies are not going to put their data on the OpenAI cloud. What you're going to see a trend, a lot of companies or a lot of countries, they're going to have a domain-specific large language model, their own internal chat GPT. So they want to benefit from what's happening with OpenAI or Google, but they're going to train their own specific data. They're going to keep that to themselves. You're going to see that with every region, a lot of bloc countries, and a lot of corporations.
I gotta confess, AJ's comments about trying to reassure everybody that AI won't end the human race is actually less reassuring and more chilling.
It's a bias, absolutely.
The fact that we're even contemplating it is kind of thing. And I was interested when you mentioned a question that I had about controlling the data that comes into the AI large language models, because how do you ensure the information flow? And the philosophical question about, there's a lot been written about the wisdom of crowds. The more access to more information will generate generally bigger results. But then how does that balance again against the mob mentality if you have a restricted data setup? But then I have actually, my question is more pragmatic. Who owns the creative content that is generated by an AI model? So if I was to go and give a prompt to say, write a pop song about the beautiful alpine mountains in the winter of Austria, it becomes a top 10 hit. That ChatGPT actually wrote, but I came up with the prompt. Who owns that?
I love you asking my domain expertise.
Yeah.
It's not decided yet, at least in the US, right? I don't necessarily know overseas. There's a guy who's going around suing in every type of IP. This guy named Thaler. I don't know if you've read these articles or not. He gave a bunch of prompts to Bard, I meant to especially trademark. Anyway, to create a design for something for like a widget, and it popped out, and he applied in the name of the AI as opposed to his own name. And the patent office was like, no, and he sued, and the federal circuit was like, no. And so basically, you can't do it in the name of the AI. And then he did the same thing in copyright. AI wrote this song or whatever it was. He did the same guy, and then he did the same thing in trademark. They came up with this trademark for this product, and the trademark office said no. And so, like, at least so far, the U.S. policy is the AI can't own it. And one of the commentary was even from the judges was like, if you had said that you did this because you used a tool to help you do this, you were the inventor. And so I think there's your answer, basically, right? Recently, there was a case here in Central District, and there was a hilarious quote from one of the new judges, like appointed by Biden, I think, very recently, a young woman judge, younger than me, I think. And it was like, a bunch of comedians were claiming that these jokes made up by an AI, I can't remember which one, were derivative works of theirs under copyright. And they sued, and she said, your premise makes my head explode, or something. It was like a weird thing to be written in an illegal opinion. And so, I think it's you. I think if you use these tools, it's you.
So is a prompt subpoenable? Can you subpoena a prompt?
I think you can. I think if there's a record of it, and there is generally a record of it, I think it is subpoenable. Then you go to Google to get your opponent goes to Google to get your prompt, and then they can recreate the same thing.
Are prompts saved in the cloud? So
because they're used for, generally speaking, they're used for more training data to, you give a prompt and something pops out, and then you can give feedback, and so they use them to further train. So yes. So be careful. Like, this is a big issue. I mean, you guys don't care, but in the legal profession, I can't really use open AI because of that issue. It was a breach of client confidentiality, right? Like if I say, my client does this cool thing, and he does this thing, and he does this thing, that is safe forever. I've just told the world theoretically about my client's confidences, and that's an ethical issue for me. These are legal specific issues I'm talking about in AI in other contexts, but you've got to be careful, I guess, is the answer.
Thank you. And you do have actually some tools like Anthropic. Their user agreement, they specifically say that they don't keep the prompts that you submit, so whatever you submit is actually never retained. And so, but OpenAI is it's known. They keep it, it's theirs. But some tools like Anthropic, which is built more around trying to address some of those issues, they at least are saying in their user agreement, which I guess they need to buy to, that they don't retain that. So it could vary by tool.
Hi. I do want to make a comment back on the, and I will make a question too, but when you said human plus machine equals success, that's the basic foundation of a cyborg, and that is not. So back to me freaking out about Stan. But my question has to do with contracts and international business. So I know we're talking about the EU already talking about AI being a law, but with things like the CISG, if they were to incorporate, let's say, any kind of AI law, do you believe that would deter people from, or would it actually cause people to opt out of CISG more or less?
The IP lawyer, you want to? Sorry, I want to just silo one.
Okay. The CISG. I'm sorry. What are we talking about? Sorry.
So I'm just saying that if the CISG were to adopt an article that says whether to.
What is the CISG?
That is what kind of dictates international business law, correct? If there's a lot of countries that have already. Oh my gosh, please say I learned something.
I'm sorry. I don't know.
I
feel like I'm an IP lawyer. Maybe it's not something that dictates.
So it's something that has to do with. There's not every country has agreed to these articles, and these the U.S. has their own version, which is very similar, and it says, should a contract be, in default or whatnot, these are the conditions for how the U.S. would go to court with Japan, and there's things in the contracts. But if they were to adopt an article that says something to do with AI being involved in the contract creation and continuing, I'm asking if you believe that would create more international businesses opting out, saying we don't want to use these laws anymore to create contracts. So far, they've been using.
I don't think so. I would think it's more about the substance than how you get there, right? It's kind of like, because you, in my view anyway, because you use Word to type up something, a contract, I'm not worried about it because Word was used. I'm worried about it because of what's in it, right? Like I would think. And there's thinking in the legal profession in general, like licensing. I do a lot of licensing, trademarks, copyrights, patents. There's thinking that those terms will start to become, I won't even do any negotiations anymore. It'll be like, here's the terms we've agreed on, and somebody will spit out a contract that's basically form, and it'll even say, this one kind of favors your side, this one kind of, just kind of, it's expected that that'll be much more standard, and I think that would be the same case for you, like, oh, this is just the contract we use, like, because this is what AI says is fair, or whatever, right? Like, kind of weirdly.
If I may, just quickly, I think sometimes we tend to think of it as binary. It's either this or that. All what I'm advocating is, I think having a human in the loop assisted by AI and machines can help us solve a lot of problems. I'm a father of 5 kids, okay? Some of them struggle in school. And if you look at our schooling system, someday we're gonna look back at our educational system and say, it's not how backward it is. I think it's just cruel, okay? Imagine right now a classroom where I want a human in the classroom. We need to have a human in the classroom. We need to have a human as a teacher. But imagine if that teacher is assisted by an AI agent, can understand each individual student's, what their weaknesses, what their strengths. How can I tailor this course to basically fit their needs and allow that human teacher to basically design it? We can do a lot with the combination of the human race and AI.
Thank you.
I'll give you 2. Sweet. I have 2 questions for you guys. First one is for John. There are 2 Johns? Professor John. There was a
One Professor John.
One Professor John. There was a graph that you had in your slide deck about like how performant people were using AI versus not using AI. My question was, how was the performance score, or how performant an individual was? Do you know how that was measured? And whether you do or don't, can you comment on how AI should be measuring performance and what sort of augmentation?
So I think is that question related to the Boston Consulting study?
I think so. It was basically like people who were underperforming got 43% better, people who performed okay.
So this was Boston Consulting Management. So it's them, they assess the level of quality based on their own internal measures as to each of the tasks and what constitutes the quality of the work. And so internally, most firms will have some measurement measures the quality of the work. And so they were using the same basis of measurement of quality that Boston Consulting has across both sets of individuals. So it's internal to Boston Consulting. And that paper talks about further, it's a very long paper, but it's actually very well detailed on how they went about doing this and the different tasks they had people do.
Then in that same vein, as a professor, at one point you mentioned that you would be using AI to help grade papers and stuff. What are your thoughts on AI judging performance or grading your students based off of how they're learning, knowing that they're going to be augmented by AI?
The question for me?
Just in general. I mean, anybody can comment on that.
I'd like to take a kind of an initial cut at it, okay? Again, I'm advocating for a human in the loop. Today, I'm going to be redundant on that issue. Today in the Midwest, I'm going to use a different case, criminal justice system. Today in the Midwest, because they have a backlog of cases, they're using machine learning. They're using AI to judge cases. To be honest with you, I'm not opposed to that, okay? And I will accept an AI system to judge me, provided you give me explainability how you arrive at the answer and provide an audit trail, step by step how you arrived at the answer. But don't be a black box. Don't tell me, and today that's the current conventional AI systems. Today they're black box. We need explainable AI. Explain to me how you got the answer and explain to me the audit trail and I'll accept the answer.
I think as a professor, there's things that AI can augment and your ability to provide more individualized feedback. So let's say I got a class of 30 students and I'm evaluating maybe a dashboard they created. So if I got 25, 30 students in a class, and generally I may spend 10 to 15 minutes reviewing the dashboard of a student and giving them feedback. Now, a lot of the feedback, I would say 80% of the feedback is going to be very similar and consistent. Missing a title, there's things that you should, instead of using a pie chart, maybe use a bar chart. Very kind of consistent themes of things. Now, if I got 15 minutes to kind of spend on one student, there's only a certain amount of feedback that I can write. So where you can augment is, I'm still going to spend 15 minutes, but I'm going to get all the easy stuff out of the way by having the AI kind of generate that feedback. And then I'm going to add more feedback that's going to go in more depth, and you're going to be coming out better because you're going to have me as a professor. I'm going to go into the more reasoning level of feedback that the AI will not give. But the AI will give me some great feedback on title, use this chart versus that chart. I look at it and say, no, I don't agree with that. And then I'm going to add my own. I'm still spending 15 minutes, and the experience for the student is going to be much better because you're going to get much more detail and insightful feedback beyond what I could have done if I didn't have augmentation by AI.
I'm going to ask my question. Another question?
I'm going to come back. We have two over on the other side.
Hi, thank you for taking the question. I think what perplexes me in this world of AI is that information, that AI being based on information, there's, I think, huge questions about how that information is collected, where it is collected, the bias of the information that is collected. Cultures and countries have agendas, they have biases, and I think this information is very loaded. And I'm just wondering if you can project how that issue is or will be dealt with.
It is a big issue. I agree with you 100%. And that's why we need explainable AI. We need to understand how you arrive at the answer. I want to give you a simple example. Google a while back did this experiment, and they were trying to basically predict, when the flu season will start, and what are the elements that contribute to the flu season starting, okay? And they ran large data sets, and their conclusion that the flu season is associated with the releases of new Paul Newman movies. This is ridiculous, okay? So I'm just giving you an example where data is important, and most often, if the data is correct and accurate, we're gonna get the right results. But we gotta make sure that, again, you're gonna hit me with that, there is a human in the loop, and we need to make sure also that we have guardrails, okay, to understand, the source of the information. What's the outcome of these sources? You're pointing out, and I think Professor John mentioned this earlier, to a problem where we cannot just rely on data alone. We need that human element.
Yeah, and all that data was basically scraped from the internet. And the internet's not biased, right? Social media. So you're right. I mean, it is a bias. And you've seen actually a lot of these, like OpenAI and others, have been making big strides in trying to improve their responses and being it more just and kind of diverse. But it's still not there. I'll give you an example. So right now, if you go into OpenAI and it says, okay, generate a picture of a doctor, and you do that multiple times, it'll give you some diversity in the responses. But what happens if you give a response very detailed, say, give me a picture of a doctor who's walking down a hall, there's 3 patients on the right, 1 on the left, there's actually a clock here, and it says it's almost midnight, and get very detailed request. And all of a sudden, you keep giving them that very detailed request, and almost all the time, you get back a white male back as a doctor. So the more detail you give, it kind of reverts back to the bias. But on the surface, there's actually, they try to address it if you do like a basic prompt, as an example. So the point is, the bias is still there in the data, and these companies are trying to address it on the surface, but frankly, they don't know exactly how it's working themselves. That's part of the problem, right? And so how do you pick something that you don't know exactly how it's working? Is you try to put some guardrails on the top, but as soon as you start kind of meddling around with more details, it reverts back. That's going to be an ongoing problem that I don't think it's going to be solved immediately. That's why you need a human in the loop.
I think you're right. I think it's more basic. It's just society has those, and so it will trail society, right? And so because it uses the data sets that are created by society, and so the answer isn't really to fix the AI, in my opinion. I mean, we should try. I'm not giving up, but I'm just saying the answer is make society better, and it's a moving target, and it will slowly improve.
The one other interesting thing is OpenAI was built before anyone realized that they were siphoning all their data. So now everyone wants to, if you're going to take my data, I want to get paid. So any new large language model doesn't have open season on all the data that's out there. So they're actually going to be at a detriment relative to like an OpenAI. So that's going to be interesting to kind of see how that evolves. I was reading a story today that OpenAI just today announced they're going to start paying, I forget, the company that has Business Insider, Politico, they're going to start paying them for content. But I think you're going to see more and more of that occurring, and it's going to put some of the smaller large language models at a disadvantage because they're not open AI, who have access to everything before anyone realizes what's going on.
Maybe also to that point, from the EU perspective, transparency is a very important issue in our new regulation, and maybe also to clarify the EU approach is that we have a risk-oriented approach. So if there is a high risk connected with the usage of AI, then there are stronger rules that apply. And for instance, as an example, facial recognition was a very hot issue in the negotiations, whether or not that should be included or should be excluded at all. And now it's possible, but in a very limited sphere, only law enforcement issues, and they are also in a very limited manner. So I think that data will be collected, but it's important how it is used or whether it's allowed to be used, plus the notion of transparency.
It was interesting, the framework, that I read a little bit about this today. For example, in financial decisions, mortgages in Europe, that's one of the high-risk areas, and they say you can't really use AI without supervision. You have to be careful because you could deny mortgages to all people of certain races, or like that. It's risky as opposed to information on the internet, not that risky, like whatever. That was an interesting approach that I kind of agreed with. I agree.
I was also happy to see that education was in the high risk. So I guess we'll still have a job.
Thank you. Thank you all for the presentation. Since Austria has given the world some of the best music composers in the history of music, I'd like to ask my question by giving you a scenario. Let's say we have a symphonic orchestra wants to give a performance, but this time, instead of a regular conductor, we put a robot, which is enabled by AI. You give him the score, you give him the notes, music notes by the composer. You also give him all the recordings of the past recordings of the same piece of music, and say, go. How do you think that performance will come out?
It depends on what you feed it. The more data you feed it, the more it listens to, it's gonna produce quality stuff. They have some examples where they basically made an AI system, they trained it on a lot of like Mozart, and it produced pieces of music that people were having difficulty differentiating between what's real and what's not real. I think this is important. AI, I think it was said earlier, I don't remember who said it, it's kind of really a reflection of the human race. It's learning from us. You mentioned it in December. It's gonna slow down because we do slow down. It's a reflection for us. Last year, in 2020, in a Colorado State Fair, a #1 prize for art went to an AI system. There was a huge backlash in the art community. We're just losing to me, that's the wrong way of looking at it. That doesn't mean that AI is better than human. It's not. It just, AI reached a maturity level because of the training of the human, I call it socializing the human, that now some human basically like that, like the product that is produced by AI. But ultimately, the creativity is done by the human race.
It's not novel. It's kind of the point. It does a really good job of creating something that replicates the current human understanding and in this case music, but it's not novel, but it's novel to us in the context that we bring. Is that interesting kind of distinction here.
I wonder if the data set wouldn't be big enough, and it would just do kind of an average of all these different performances, which is kind of weird because the data set would be like 40 performances or something.
You're right, that's not a lot of
In
data.
in this scenario, we are dealing with human emotions, which is not digital. All the data we have is produced by digital systems, and it's fundamentally different, So I submit to you that that performance is going to go very bland, okay, right to the notes. Critics, they don't like it. Maybe the answer is in the future when quantum computers come in, that instead of 0 and 1, will give you an almost infinite number of options between 0 and 1. Okay. And that it would be the technology that you can rely on to have to express human emotions too.
Look, I agree with you. I think quantum is going to change the game, clearly, okay? So you add quantum to what we're doing in AI, we got a different game. However, let me comment on one thing you said. That actually today, we're doing a lot on emotional intelligence in terms of feelings, you know. You don't hear a lot about it, but there's a lot of advancement on the emotional intelligence side. But I totally agree with you. You will be hard to believe what they're doing on the emotional intelligence, especially work done in Japan, work done in China. They're very advanced in that area. But you're right, add quantum to that, a different game.
Well, with that, I think that was a wonderful last question. And to take this up, I think if you come to Vienna to the State Opera and listen to one of the famous Austrian composer, it's still, this is better than any other. I thank the audience, I thank the panelists, and before concluding, I will hand over to my colleague, to my dear colleague, Volker Ammann, for some final words.
Guys, it could have been so easy. It could have been. The order was shortly. These two gentlemen make this difficult and they challenge the Austrian Trade Commission. As I said, artificial intelligence and Austria, they mentioned the United States and China. Just let me tell you quickly, all of you are using this one. And these smartphones, they don't work without Austrian technology. You drive a car outside, you can be quite sure there is Austrian technology inside. We are not very good outside, we are very good inside. We are very good on emotions. I have to warn you, we are everywhere, even within the artificial intelligence. Now concluding, I would say, whenever and I don't know how you feel about it, but whenever I took my deep dive on artificial intelligence, I got more questions afterwards than I had before, and I was more worried than before. This evening was completely different. This gentleman changed it, honestly. AJ was very good in convincing me that artificial intelligence is only good as long as the human factor is inside. True. Jonathan did basically the same. Professor John worried me a bit, to be honest. But at the end of the day, if I try to go to the conclusion of what Professor John told me tonight, it said, you're gonna lose your job. The positive I take out of it, it's not my job anymore to worry. So it was a very positive evening. Thank you guys. Thank you for thank you for your interest. Thank you for your presentation and the dialogue. It was really nice and interesting. Thank you for organizing it and putting it together. All of you, have a nice evening. Thank you very much.